For 20 years, a trucker hauled a trailer he never opened. Same trailer, every route, every state. Locked with a padlock he wore the key to on a chain around his neck. And in 20 years, not one person at any dock in America ever saw the inside of it. The other drivers had theories. Empty, most of them said. Just an old man's habit, something he was too stubborn to let go of. They were closer to the truth than they knew, and further from it than they could have imagined.
Because when that trailer was finally opened, 3 days after Warren Pike's funeral, the men standing in that yard took off their caps, and one of them had to sit down on the gravel. Stay with me all the way to the end of this one. What was in that trailer is the reason I could not stop thinking about this story for weeks. Let me take you back to the beginning. Warren Pike drove for 31 years out of a small town in southern Indiana, and for the first 11 of those years, he was the most ordinary man you could imagine. He was married to a woman named Cheryl, who cut hair out of their front room. He coached a little league team on the summers he was home enough to. He had a mortgage, a decent truck, a lawn he mowed on Saturdays, and a boy. The boy's name was Sam. Everybody in that town remembered Sam Pike, 6 years old, gap-toothed, permanently in motion. The kind of kid who narrated his own life out loud. He had a scuffed pair of light-up sneakers he refused to take off, even in the bath, and a stuffed dog with one ear chewed off that he had named, with the unimpeachable logic of a 6-year-old, Dog. Sam was obsessed with his father's truck. Not the way kids like trucks. The way a person loves a place. Warren would come home off a run, and before he was out of the cab, Sam was climbing up the side of it, and they'd sit in the driver's seat together, and Sam would grip the wheel with both hands and make engine noises and tell his father where they were going. Always somewhere invented. Somewhere he'd made up that morning. Warren used to say the boy had the road in him already. He used to say it proudly. On the 12th of August, in the year Sam was 6, Cheryl took him to a county fair 2 towns over. It was a Saturday. It was crowded. 30,000 people crowded, the biggest day of that fair's year. Warren was on a run to Nashville and back, and had promised to meet them there by 5. At around 3 in the afternoon, in the 10 seconds it took Cheryl to pay for 2 lemonades, Sam Pike walked away from the lemonade stand. And nobody ever saw him again. Now, I want to be careful here, and I want to be honest with you about what this story is and what it isn't. Because this is not a story about what happened to that little boy. Nobody knows what happened to that little boy. Not then, not now, not in the 20 years that followed. This is a story about what his father did with the not knowing. If you have ever waited for something that never came, if you have ever kept a light on, or a chair empty, or a phone charged for someone who did not come home, then you already understand Warren Pike better than the men at the truck stop ever did. Subscribe if you believe some kinds of faithfulness deserve to be remembered. And tell me down in the comments about the person you have never stopped waiting to hear from. I read every single one. Now, let me tell you what happened to that family. The first year was the loud year. Searches. Volunteers in orange vests walking cornfields in lines. State police, then federal. A photograph of a gap-toothed boy in light-up sneakers on the front page of every paper in 3 states. Warren Pike quit driving entirely for 11 months and did nothing but look. He drove his own pickup down every county road in a 100-mile radius. He put up flyers at every truck stop, from Indianapolis to Memphis. He learned to say the words, "My son is missing," without his voice breaking, which is a skill no man should ever have to develop. The second year was quieter. The third was quieter still. That is how it goes, and it is nobody's fault. The world has to keep turning, and other people's children come home from school, and life closes over the whole like water. By the 5th year, Cheryl could not do it anymore. I want to be very clear about this part, because I do not want you to think badly of her. and Warren never did. Cheryl Pike did not stop loving her son. She stopped being able to live inside the waiting. There is a difference, and it is enormous, and it destroys marriages every day of the year. She needed to grieve. Actually grieve, with a beginning and a middle and an end. Warren could not. Warren would not. Because grieving felt to him like closing a door his boy might still be standing behind. They divorced in the 6th year. It was gentle, as those things go. She moved to Ohio and remarried a good man and had a daughter. And Warren, who was invited to the wedding and went, told anyone who asked that Cheryl had done the right thing and that he was glad. He meant it. He just could not do it himself. And in the 7th year after Sam disappeared, Warren Pike bought a used 48-foot dry van trailer, and he pulled it into the pole barn behind his house, and he did not come out for most of a winter. Nobody knew what he was doing in there. He went back to driving that spring, and from that spring until the day he died, 20 years later, that trailer went everywhere Warren Pike went. He hauled his loads in a different trailer. He'd hook and drop the working one like everybody does. But the sealed trailer stayed with him, parked at whatever yard he was based out of, moved along whenever he changed companies, hooked up and towed empty on the long relocations. He paid to store it. He paid to move it. He paid to keep it registered and inspected and insured. For 20 years, for nothing. There was a heavy padlock on the back doors, and Warren wore the key on a bootlace around his neck, every day, under his shirt. The drivers noticed, of course. You cannot hide a habit like that in trucking. And the theories went around the way theories do at 3 a.m. over bad coffee. Some said he was storing his ex-wife's furniture. Some said it was money. Some said it was junk. That Warren had gone a little strange after the divorce. And that a man is entitled to one strange thing. A young driver asked him about it directly, once, at a yard in Kentucky. Just came right out and said, "Warren, what the hell's in the trailer?" And Warren Pike, who was not an unkind man, looked at him for a second and said, "Something I'm keeping." That was all. That was the whole answer for 20 years. Warren died in the autumn at 64 in his own bed, which is more than a lot of drivers get. He'd been sick for about a year. He kept driving for 10 months of it, because that is what he knew how to do, and he stopped only when the company told him gently that he had to. The funeral was small, but real. Old drivers came from 4 states. Cheryl came and cried and sat in the second row with her husband, who held her hand the whole service and never once looked like a man who wished he were somewhere else. And in the will, Warren left 3 things. He left the house to Cheryl, which nobody expected, and Cheryl protested until the lawyer read the line Warren had written next to it, "Because it was hers first, and I was only keeping the lights on." He left his savings to a national organization for missing children. And he left the trailer and the key that hung around his neck to a man named Dale Ruthers, his oldest friend on the road, a driver he'd known since they were both 24, with a single instruction: open it, then decide what happens to it. 3 days after the funeral, Dale Ruthers drove out to that yard with 4 other old drivers and a lawyer and Cheryl, who had asked to be there, and then sat in her car for 10 minutes before she could get out. It was a cold, clear morning. Dale had the bootlace and the key in his fist, and he stood at the back of that trailer for a long moment before he could make himself do it. He said later he was terrified. He said he had spent 20 years telling himself it was empty, because the alternative was worse. And now he was about to find out. The padlock was well oiled. Someone had been taking care of it. Dale Ruthers turned the key and swung the doors open, and the morning light went in. And what was inside that trailer was a bedroom. Not boxes, not junk, not stored furniture. A child's bedroom, built to the walls, finished and complete and clean. There was a single bed against the left wall with a blue quilt on it, made up tight enough to bounce a coin off. There was a nightstand with a lamp. There was a bookshelf
and a chest of drawers, and a rug on the plywood floor. The walls had been framed out, insulated, drywalled, and painted a soft pale blue, and along the top of them ran a hand-painted border of little trucks, done carefully by a man who was not an artist, but who had taken his time. There was a window frame on the right-hand wall, a real window frame with a curtain, mounted to nothing, opening onto the inside of a trailer, because a bedroom is supposed to have a window. The bed had a stuffed dog on the pillow, one ear chewed off, and on the wall beside the door, in pencil, there was a line of height marks. The first one was low and dated from the year Sam disappeared, copied over from a door frame in a house Warren no longer owned. And above it were more marks going up the wall, one for every year, each one dated in Warren's careful hand, marked at the height a boy would have been at 7 and 8 and 9 and 12, 16 and 20. 2 decades of a child growing up on the wall of a locked trailer, measured by a father who had nothing to measure but arithmetic and hope. The clothes in the chest of drawers were the same. The bottom drawer had a 6-year-old's shirts, the one Sam had actually worn, folded. The drawer above it had clothes for a 7-year-old, then 8, then 10, all the way up to the top drawer, which held a man's clothes, sized for a young man of 26, with the tags still on them. Every year, on the 12th of August, the day his son walked away from a lemonade stand, Warren Pike had gone into that trailer alone and marked the wall and bought a set of clothes in the size his boy would be wearing now, and put them in the drawer and closed the door and locked it and gone back to work for 20 years. Because if that boy was found anywhere, in any condition, at any age, Warren Pike was not going to have his son come home to nothing. He was going to have a room. It was going to be ready. It was going to have his dog on the pillow, and his height on the wall, and clothes that fit him. And he was going to know, immediately and without being told, that somebody had been keeping his place there entire time. That is what was in the trailer. That is what Warren Pike hauled across America for 20 years and paid to store and never once explained to anybody. Not a shrine. He would have hated the word. A room. Ready. Dale Ruthers stood in the doorway of that trailer and looked at a bed made up tight and a stuffed dog on the pillow, and he took his cap off. And behind him, the other 4 old drivers took their caps off too, one after another, without anybody saying a word, the way men do at a graveside. One of them, a driver named Cobb, 61 years old, hard as a hammer, who had once driven 11 hours on a broken foot rather than call for relief, sat down on the gravel and cried into his hands. Cheryl came last. She stood at the open doors, and she saw the dog on the pillow, the one she had bought at a drugstore when Sam was 2 years old, the one she had assumed was lost with everything else in the divorce. And she saw the height marks, 20 years of them, and Cheryl Pike, who had made peace, who had built a whole second life on the other side of the worst thing that ever happened to her, said the sentence that Dale Ruthers says he will carry to his own grave. She said he was still setting a place. Now here's the part of this story I need to tell you carefully, because it is the part that makes it worth telling at all. It would be easy to hear all of this and think, what a terrible waste. What a sad, stuck man. He should have let go. He should have healed. He should have lived. I want to push back on that, gently, because the people who knew Warren Pike pushed back on it hard. Warren Pike was not a wreck. Ask the drivers. He was the man you called at 2 in the morning. He was the first one to a breakdown on the shoulder, every single time, for 31 years, and he never took gas money for it. He taught more young drivers to back a trailer than any instructor in that state. He remembered every man's kids' names. He was, by unanimous testimony, one of the steadiest and most useful human beings in that entire community. He built a room for his son, and then he went out and drove and helped people. Both things, at the same time,
for 20 years. The trailer was not where he put his life. It was where he put the part of his life that could not go anywhere else, the hope that had nowhere to be, so that the rest of him could keep working. He gave that hope a place to live, and locked the door on it, and wore the key against his chest, and got on with being good to people. That is not a man who was stuck. That is one of the most practical acts of endurance I have ever heard of. Dale Ruthers had one instruction from his oldest friend. Open it, then decide what happens to it. He thought about it for 2 weeks. He talked to Cheryl. He talked to the other drivers. And what they decided is the reason this story exists at all. They did not empty it. They did not burn it, which one of them suggested, and they did not put it in a museum, which somebody else suggested, and both of those men were trying to be kind in their own way. They took the trailer to the headquarters of the Missing Children's organization that Warren had left his savings to, and they gave it to them. Whole, sealed as it was, and that organization did something with it that Dale Ruthers said he never saw coming. They take it to conferences now, to training events for law enforcement, and to gatherings for families of long-term missing children. They open the back doors, and they let people walk through it, because it turns out that what Warren Pike built in a locked trailer is the single most articulate thing anybody has ever made about what it is to be the family of a missing child. You can explain it in words for an hour and not land it. You walk into that room and see clothes with the tags still on them, sized for a young man of 26, and you understand it in about 4 seconds. Cops walk through it and come out different. Dale has watched it happen. He says you can tell the ones who understood because they go quiet and then they go back to work harder. And every year now, on the 12th of August, somebody from that organization goes into that trailer and marks the wall. They kept it going. They mark the height Sam Pike would be at 27 and 28 and 29. Because a case that is still open is still open, and because Warren Pike's whole argument, made in pencil on a trailer wall for 20 years, was that you do not stop counting a person just because you cannot see them. Sam Pike has never been found. I am not going to give you an ending on that, because there isn't one, and I would be lying to you if I invented one. That is the actual shape of this story, and there is no way around it. But here's what I keep coming back to. 20 years of drivers thought that trailer was empty. 20 years of theories at 3 a.m. over bad coffee, junk, furniture, and old man stubbornness. They were standing next to it the whole time. They leaned on it. They parked beside it. Not one of them knew that 6 inches of steel away there was a bed made up tight, and a stuffed dog on a pillow, and a wall with a boy's whole growing up penciled onto it, year after year, by a father who refused to stop counting. We do that with people, I think. We stand right next to what somebody is carrying, and we call it empty, because empty is easier than the alternative. The other drivers saw a locked trailer and an old man's habit. Warren Pike saw a room with the light on. Some men lose a child and lose themselves with him. And some men build a bedroom in a trailer and mark the wall every August and haul it 4 million miles across America, just in case the door ever opens and a boy walks in. That somebody kept his place. He kept it, Sam. 20 years, and every